time is it? What time is it? What time is it?
Welcome to Talking About Sports, the Carolina's #1 podcast. We are #1 because you make us #1. Here, back from a brief hiatus, Reggie Walker from Penn State, the Carolina Panthers, ESPN two-time Emmy Award winner. Jeff Taylor, our JT, since our other JT, John Tobias, is still on assignment somewhere around Europe, Scandinavia, and the subcontinent. So he's somewhere in parts unknown.
Parts unknown.
Well, that's a wrestling term.
Yeah, it is. I love it.
I love it. Lots going on. We got the Carolina Panthers final preseason. And by the way, Mike Pacheco on assignment. The Knights are playing as we speak right now, so he's calling Knights baseball right now. So, all right, Reggie, lots going on with the things that are impacting the not just the sports landscape, but the national landscape with Hurricane Harvey. I used to live and work in Houston. I kind of know the fabric. I actually covered Hurricane Ike in 2008. I know to an extent what is going on down there, and I know people and the spirit of the people that live there. They're undefeated, and you're not going to get by with any shenanigans. No weather event is going to beat the spirit of Texans. We have the NFL is also going to be impacted. A cancellation of a game between the Houston Texans and Dallas Cowboys. The game originally scheduled for NRG Stadium in Houston moved to Dallas. In fact, the Texans were already in Dallas going to play the game. The game now canceled. It's a good move or not?
I think it is a good move. I think anytime you have – first of all, listen, the players will tell you in a heartbeat, and some of the owners, the preseason doesn't matter, right?
Exactly.
So this is a time where football really does not matter, especially a preseason game. Regular season, you have that, whatever. But in terms of a preseason game, it doesn't matter. You can move on from this. This game does not need to be played. The majority of guys that, are expected to make the roster, they kind of already know that. You've got some fringe guys that, yes, they lose an opportunity to get evaluated one more time, but I think they even understand the ramifications of this. I mean, you're talking about people that are having to sit on their roof because of the amount of water that's already inside of their house. So listen, I mean, there were some spots down there that got upwards of 50 inches of rain. Who cares about a football game?
And I think the interesting part, too, is, and you're right on the money there, and the players, they are not thinking football right now.
No.
They are thinking, how can we as an NFL team make an impact for the city? J.J. Watts has gotten on Instagram, and his foundation, I think he's trying to get to $10 million now.
Yeah.
And I know people from all over have just contributed tons of money, which is a great thing. And I'll just toot their horn, Titans owner.
Yes.
She ended up giving $1 million to his fund.
The former Houston Oilers.
The former Houston Oilers.
Yes.
But, you're right. And, of course, our prayers and thoughts with everybody in Houston and the whole Texas area and Louisiana. But you're right. It's just preseason game number 4. Don't worry about it. Let's pray for the people. Let's get Houston back on its feet, and football will be there when it's ready.
Absolutely.
And did you hear the story of Dove? And this is not just, as we said, impacting sports. I mean, Jonathan Simmons, formerly of the Spurs, now at the Orlando Magic, he lives in Houston. He's from Houston. How he had to escape. I mean, his house was up. He knew that everything was coming. They went to a house on high ground, and more people showed up that they weren't expecting. But they didn't have. They ran out of rations. He had to get out and ride in the back of a dump truck to get somewhere, and he couldn't get to his car. And to make his way out to survive. I mean, that's what it literally turned out to, human survival. I mean, what do you do in that case?
Listen, in that case, man, it's about lives. It's about, minimizing the amount of lives that are maximally affected and trying to find a way to just bring some solace. You see video of people getting rescued in helicopters, and you can tell, man, like, as soon as they get in a helicopter or they get into a place where they're being driven to shelter, you can just see that they lose like 800 pounds of air off of their shoulders because some of them, they haven't been able to sleep. They haven't been able to – you can't think straight when you don't know if you're going to make it to your next meal.
And the scary part is we're just talking about this one preseason game. Who knows what the next 2 or 3 weeks hold? Who knows what the next 2 or 3 years holds for this city?
Absolutely.
We saw what Katrina did with New Orleans and stuff, and I know what football meant when they played that first game in the Superdome again. But like you said, this is human life, and this is something that it's going to be years before this city gets back to normal. So while they're canceling this game, it'll be curious to see how the NFL and how other teams adjust to. I think Jacksonville maybe already reached out about switching dates.
I think I've read that they said that they are going to play the first home game in Houston. I'm with you, JT. I think they should switch with the Jaguars. The Astros are home this weekend. Of course, these are retractable dome stadiums. When I was there in 08, Hurricane Ike, the roof was blown open. So every game was an outdoor game the 2008 season. So lots to be to take care of. And one of the UFC's heavyweight fighters, whose name escapes me currently, I'll get it later in the show. He has a huge, like one of these monster trucks jacked up, a lot of lift kits and all that. Good truck, by the way. He's doing his part. He's helping with rescue efforts and distributing supplies in the area. We're just getting started. We're coming back with more Talking About Sports right here on ADSN. All right, welcome back to Talking About Sports. Reggie Walker, Jeff Taylor, and the final preseason game for the Carolina Panthers is tonight. You would think most coaches on the staff have an idea who's on the final 53. There could be a few late surprises. It's a 90-man roster for the first time, so it's a lot of cuts. Some guys who are on the bubble, maybe Demir Bird, Brenton Burson, Austin Duke from Charlotte. Reggie, who do you think are going to be some surprise cuts, and who are going to be some surprise additions to the 53?
This is going to be interesting because you know when you start getting down to the 5th, 6th, and 7th receiver, the first thing you got to figure out is how many the team wants to keep. Do they want to keep 6? Do they want to keep 5? Do they want to keep 7? Because we know with the Panthers, they're definitely going to use 2 tight ends. They're going to use Dixon and Olsen.
Right.
And then you've got a situation where you're looking at a guy like Curtis Samuel, who's definitely going to be there, along with Funchess, obviously, and of course, Kelvin Benjamin.
Right.
So now you start looking down this list, and you have to figure out as an organization, because, again, they flex. Olsen can flex out a lot.
Right.
I'm not saying he's a wide receiver,
well, and
but
you
you
bring
can
McCaffrey
flex
in the
him
mix,
out.
too.
And you bring McCaffrey in the mix as well. So how many receivers do they keep becomes the first question.
Right.
Do they keep 5? Do they keep 6? Do they keep 7?
How many running backs?
So that, and how many
Cameron
running backs?
Payne,
And
Fozzie Whitaker.
Right. Cameron Artis-Payne, Fozzie Whitaker, of course Stu, of course McCaffrey. So now you've got to figure out what happens at that position. Do they try to keep a traditional fullback?
I think Fozzie Whitaker is going to make the team. Number one, he's from Houston. He's my guy, and he and I are friends, and I like him. But he brings too much to the table as terms of a third down running back out of the backfield, a good receiver, good returner, special team guy.
And you just made the right point. His versatility, I think that speaks to what happens with this receiving corps. We haven't seen Brenton Burson do much outside of play the receiver position.
And kneeling to make
Demir
punts.
Bird he can run some
He fields
punts.
punts while on his knees.
Right. Austin Duke, so that's what we've got to figure out is who's able to show the most outside of the standard position of wide receiver. That's who's going to make this roster.
I don't see him. I don't know if I see him going more than 5. I don't. And if that's the case, I think Bird has played himself onto the team. I think he's had a solid preseason. He can, return punts.
And Shepard, the guy they got from Tampa Bay, right? I mean, he's a guy they gave a free agent contract to, and he plays every special team. He's a gunner, cover guy.
That's what I mean.
Back kicks. He's at least a 4th wide receiver.
So now that's 4. So now you're at 4. So you're talking about a situation where between Bird, Burson, Kalen Clay, Austin Duke, you've got to figure out, potentially to your point, if they're only keeping 5, you got to figure out one guy for 4. You've got to figure out there's 4 guys fighting on one spot.
I don't know if Burson will make it.
I'm going to say he's definitely not, unless Jerry Richardson says he went to Wofford and he's going to make the team.
That's the only, and I'm not get political or whatever, but yeah, the Wofford connection, I don't know. I could see him gone.
I agree. I mean, it's a tough thing to do, and again, Demir Bird has shown that versatility with the different things he can do, and I think Kalen Clay. Listen, I remember this kid in college. Kalen Clay's a playmaker.
Yeah,
but he may be the odd man out. Now
I don't think he's making it.
Right, he may find his way on the practice squad.
Well,
I agree. Bird is fast.
But who do you risk? Austin Duke, Clay. Do these guys? He said, yeah, he can't make us, but I want to keep him on the practice squad.
I think Bird is the guy you can't risk losing.
And here's the sad part about all this too, and you guys may have discussed this earlier on. Going from the 90 to 53,
I can't stand it.
These poor guys now who get the boot. Back then when they had the levels or whatever and the rotating dates or whatever, at least they could then try to get on with somebody right away.
Somewhere else.
Now it's kind of like we got our team, we got our practice squad, we're going.
Not to mention, if you're a fringe guy, you're probably still going to play most of the preseason, the 4th preseason game.
Right.
You don't want a guy that's never going to make your roster, no chance, to tear a knee up in the 4th preseason game, because you're probably going to not give him an injury settlement at that point. You can just waive him because he wasn't going to make the roster anyway. And now this guy's out there on the street with no money or no anything and an injury.
And what about? And there's also guys with big cap numbers who could be casualties, like we saw with Cleveland yesterday. Joe Hayden immediately signed by the Steelers. Could there
Great
be
pickup for the
a
Steelers.
surprise cut from around the league that could make his way to Carolina? And what are some potential positions that they? And I think you can never have enough good offensive linemen. But what are some other positions that maybe a surprise cut from another team in the league could find their way on the Carolina roster? It's going to happen to many teams.
Well, I think to your point, and you mentioned a guy in Joe Hayden that was a discussion point for some people locally. You can, to your point, the Panthers' defensive line looks good. They've got depth there.
Agreed.
Like you said, you can never have too many offensive linemen. You can also never have too many defensive backs in the league that has become a primary passing league. So the secondary is always a situation where if you can upgrade your talent in the back end, in this league, at the way it's currently constructed, the speed and the passing games that all these teams are running. Again, you're a team. The Panthers are in the NFC. They've got to deal with guys like Carson Palmer in Arizona, Matt Ryan in Atlanta, Drew Brees, Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston, highest paid player in NFL history, Matthew Stafford. You still got Aaron Rodgers. There's a lot of quarterbacks in the NFC you got to deal with.
Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson's another one. So you can never have too many guys that can play past the
2 years ago, they were picking
Eli Manning. Forgot about
Eli.
Two-time Super Bowl.
Yeah, 2 years ago, they were picking guys off the street like Jeff Taylor's buddy, Cortland Finnegan, and Robert McClain.
They played.
And not only did they play, I think McClain
got the
started
rotation,
at the end of the
McClain
year.
kept starting.
Absolutely.
So Finnegan got in there. I don't know how many times he got in, but he was.
That's a piece of it. So I think to your point, you've got to figure out, and the other piece of it is the Panthers are also fairly young in the secondary. Now they've got some guys that are veterans, you Captain Munderland types, but your two corners are very young players, they're second-year players. So if you can find a veteran presence even as a third corner, why run away from that?
I agreed. And not only you mentioned all the quarterbacks, but you got to look at the receivers too. It's you can, Larry Fitzgerald. You got tons.
Is Cam Newton going to play tonight? And should he?
No, I'm going to say no.
I think he should.
Here's the only pushback I'd give you there is the fact that just the injuries this year, and maybe I've missed them in the past, but it just seems like the Julian Edelmans, Ware from Kansas City, the guy from Dallas, Kitchens, he goes down. The guy from Seattle who breaks his leg, the starting offensive lineman. In the rain, if it pours down rain, and it's just he went out against Jacksonville. He only threw 2 passes, but he handed off how many times? He moved him downfield. They scored a touchdown. I don't know. I say leave it alone.
Well, what I would do with him, he probably wouldn't throw a pass, but I'd give him the first drive and let him hand that thing off, just because one of the things about it, and Coach Rivera mentioned this after the third preseason game where we did see Cam for a drive. He said Cam's still working through some timing things. If nothing else, make sure the timing and the footwork to make the proper handoffs and some of their pure run game stuff is tightened up. I wouldn't have him throw it. And if he did throw it, it would only be because we're at 3rd and 17. I'd put him in the shotgun, and it'd be a quick throw and get him out because I don't want him to take a shot. But I think you need to get him out there and let him move around a little bit.
Does going against Pittsburgh have anything to do with it, that defense?
Well, and that's part of the reason why. If Pittsburgh is – but I don't think Coach Tomlin's going to be doing a lot of blitzing or really coming after.
That's true.
And again, it would only be for a drive.
One drive.
I wouldn't really have him in there much longer than that.
One thing, I read something –
yeah, it's my, Tomlin does remind me. Our executive producer, Kevin Tolbert, reminds me, Mike Tomlin. Well, it's really just a haircut thing for most people. And the haircut and the goatee. Mike Tomlin.
Mike Tomlin, here's the stretch. You're 7 degrees of separate, or 5 degrees, whatever it is.
Omar Epps, too.
Mike Tomlin was the roommate of my high school driver's ed teacher.
Really?
Mike Tomlin's roommate at William & Mary was Darren Sharper.
Oh, yeah.
Darren Sharper's dad, Harry Sharper, was my driver's ed teacher in high school at Henrico High back in Richmond, Virginia.
Well, we're going to keep moving past that because we don't need to talk about Darren Sharper right now.
Well, he definitely got the recipe from Bill Cosby. But, all I can tell you is this is an article I read today on Terrell Pryor, a guy who I think is getting ready to come into his own, if he hadn't already, as a wide receiver. He may be the 3rd-string Washington quarterback, and they may cut this jabroni named Nate Sudfeld from Indiana. So, but the roster spot, they may need an extra DB, an extra lineman, an extra wide receiver. So Carolina blessed with Joe Webb because Joe Webb is your 3rd quarterback.
But he can play receiver.
But he also can play receiver. He runs back kicks. He covers things he's like not saying a gunner, but he's a cover guy on special teams. So I really like what, and I think Webb has had a very good camp as well.
Fantastic camp. And you're right. I mean, I guess the realm is that idea of a jack of all trades. It's becoming more and more important to be so versatile where you can bring so much to the table and do whatever, whether it's running back, special teams. Heck, we've seen guys play both sides of the ball a couple of times.
Well, the Patriots,
Brown.
the Patriots do all kinds of things.
Oh,
Yeah. If you can go out there and make plays in different ways, you're going to have a job in this league because at the end of the day, they're trying to do as much as they can to win as many games as they possibly can, spending the least amount of money.
Well,
That's just how it
you were
works.
the hybrid safety linebacker. Did you ever play any offense? And how far back did you have to go to play offense?
I actually played offense 1 year in college. I played running back, but there was a pretty good running back in front of me, a guy by the name of Larry Johnson. So I didn't see much of the field. I didn't see, formerly of the Kansas City Chiefs. So I didn't see much of the field on offense.
I played defensive end on the scout team.
I got one career rushing yard at Penn State though. I did carry. I fall forward. I'm
Not as
always
much
in
as
the pocket.
DJ Dozier.
Well, hey. Or Kajana Carter or Blair Thomas, or I can go down the list. I love those guys, by the way. Shout out to Kajana and Blair. Just had to get that in there.
Well, I mean, they're good. They're good. And Kurt Warner, not the quarterback Kurt Warner, but the guy who played for the Seahawks. Didn't he go to Penn State?
Yes, he was.
He was very notable.
Very notable. And of course, we can always go back to Mr. Capoletti.
He won a Heisman.
He won a Heisman Trophy, yes, sir.
Okay,
so we love Heisman Trophy winners. And speaking of Heisman Trophy winners, obviously we know, former MVP Cam Newton. We know what his pedigree is.
What kind of year are you expecting him coming from basically playing one drive, potentially, or maybe two drives, less than a quarter of meaningful football in the exhibition season, if you call that meaningful?
Yeah.
What kind of a season coming back from shoulder surgery do you look for this coming year for Cam Newton?
I think it's going to be – this is going to be funny. I'm going to use an analogy, and some people may not understand it. It's going to be like Usain Bolt's 100-meter race. It's going to be in stages. I think the first 2 or 3, probably 4 games.
I think he lost his last couple races.
Well, he did. That's fair. But there's going to be a stage. In track, there's a start phase. So you got to keep your head down and yada, yada, yada. I think early in the season, they're going to keep Cam making shorter throws, shorter to intermediate throws, just waiting to see the zip on the arm, make sure that's good. Then I think as you get to the middle of the season, you're going to see them start to push it down the field a little bit more often. And then by the end of the season, I think they're going to open that thing up. So I think you're going to see him in stages. The key stat that I look for, and I tell people with a quarterback position, I'm not looking at completion percentage. I'm looking at yards per attempt. And the reason why you look at yards per attempt is you want to know how many yards they're picking up every time they throw the football, whether it's an incompletion or not. And if the yards per attempt for Cam Newton are 14+, that means he's hitting big shots down the field by the late in the year, and he's doing it with great accuracy.
I don't think he needs to throw the ball 10 times the first 2 weeks against San Francisco and Buffalo. But come week 3 against the Saints, he better be ready to throw 40, 50 times.
Well, I agree with Reggie. I think it is
Against Drew Brees
stages,
and
and I think
Saints.
there's that realm of, how healthy is he going to be? You've got so much talent around him, and especially in the backfield now with McCaffrey, you can do some things with. Stewart, you got him. And I think the gist is he's got coming off that injury, and it's something I've always thought about Cam. It's just the head game. He's got to be positive, and whatever he's got to be successful early on, and whatever that looks like you said, even if he throws 10 times at San Francisco and completes 8 or whatever, it's just
he throws it 10 times and he's 8 for 10 for 100 yards, they win the game.
They win the game, and he should be ecstatic about it, and so should every Panther fan out there.
Well, and the other piece of this thing too is, listen, I don't care what anybody says, and we've talked about this ad nauseum on this show. Left tackle, left guard.
Yep.
If the blind side is not protected,
he's not on the team anymore.
That's going to be that's a fair point. But if you cannot protect, I like that Michael Orr reference. If you cannot protect Cam Newton's blind side,
right,
and he's taking shots, because chances are if he's taking a shot, he's probably going to take it from somewhere on his left side of his body,
right,
or directly in the back and land on that right shoulder.
And that's not
what you want to be happening. So if the left side of this offensive line is where it needs to be, I think we'll see Cam have a big year.
They invested a lot of money in that left side of the line with Matt Khalil.
Absolutely.
55
and
mil.
Norwell's next to him. I mean, I think they'll be all right on the left side.
I agree.
You got to think that, if you're Cam Newton, you want to be ready to go. But as Burt Reynolds said in the original Longest Yard, rule number 1, you must protect the quarterback.
That's right.
Anything happens to me, we are going to lose. So we've got that and much, much more. More Panther discussions. Plus, we're going to talk about the Belk preseason kickoff with our good friend Frank Kay from Raycom Sports. That's coming up next right here on Talking About Sports. Welcome back to Talking About Sports. Kevin Casey along with Reggie Walker, Jeff Taylor, and our good friend, a longtime friend, Frank Kay from Raycom Sports. Frank, big preseason matchup here. The NC State Wolfpack, South Carolina Gamecocks coming up at Bank of America Stadium. Why these teams? Is it the Belk College Kickoff?
Well, it's the Belk College Kickoff game. These teams, because it looked like it was going to be a good matchup on the field. They got good regional draws. Fans can get here from both campuses rather easily, so it looks like it should be a good way to kick off the season here in Charlotte.
I think it's going to be a tremendous crowd on hand. I hope the weather will cooperate. But these are really good rabid fan bases. I've covered both teams over the years. Jeff Taylor has connections to the South Carolina Gamecocks. Looking at I think it's a really good even matchup. I think both teams can make a lot of noise in their respective conferences.
I think so too. I mean, NC State was a lot of people's sleeper pick in the division for the ACC, and South Carolina's looking for that. Muschamp's been there for a little while, so now they're ready to take that next step, and their fans are really excited about it this year. So, I mean, putting them together to kick off the season, I think is a great matchup for this and a win for the city of Charlotte.
Jeff, what do you think about the Gamecocks this season? You're around the program a lot. What do you think of the Gamecocks, and what do you think they're going to do against NC State?
I think they got a lot to prove. I think it's an important game for both teams. The interesting part with South Carolina is they're so young still. I think 75% of their team last year was freshmen and sophomores. I think it'll be interesting to see. The key to this game is going to be the offense for the Gamecocks. They have 10 returning starters, but they're still young. And they're going against, an NC State defense that is pretty stout, at least up front. So I think if that offense can come out and Jake Bentley and the crew can put some points on the board early, it should be a great game. Both teams have a lot to prove. Both coaches a lot riding on this game. Just so much importance so early on. But I think the Gamecocks, that offense, that young offense, we'll see how they get out of the gate.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head with the situation for both schools, right? You've got a South Carolina school program led by Will Muschamp. People are trying to figure out exactly if the trajectory is definitely up, right? Because that's what they're looking for. And then you look at a guy like Dave Doran. Some people, there's different things you're hearing in terms of what he needs to do this year to remain there. So I think it's a big game, and it's an important way for both schools to start the season with a win, to make sure the trajectory is where people think it is. And then you add to that, I think NC State, when you look at the matchup on the field itself, NC State, again, a difference maker on the defensive front in Chubb. I also think, offensive coordinator Eli Drinkwitz, a disciple of Gus Malzahn. So he's going to do a lot of different things with that offense. They're going to have some wrinkles. They're going to play they're going to find mismatches. They're going to attack that defense. Muschamp, known as a defensive guy with a lot of young talent on defense, a young quarterback that's coming into his own. So I think this has the makings of really finding out where both programs are after one game. So it's a good early test.
Frank, you're in your capacity as sports director for Raycom Sports. You are a kind of guy that I consider you got more connections than Duke Power. You're heavily involved with Raycom and not just the Belk preseason kickoff, but the Belk Bowl.
Yes.
And you're in the know with how games in the know when games get selected for who's going to ESPN, who's going to be on Raycom, and then towards bowl season, you kind of know where the chips stack up for who's going to go to the BCS, who's going to the Orange Bowl, who's going to, fill in the blank bowl, the Belk Bowl, Camellia, et cetera. What is that like, knowing that, how you follow these teams that are in your geographical footprint? What is it like that you're going to have to, how does people like you connect and keep up with these teams, knowing how far you can project them down the season?
Well, with the selection processes that go with both conferences, there's pools. So, when you get near the end of the season, who's going or who's should likely go to the playoff or go to the top bowl there. The important thing is to know what all the teams are doing during the year. All the bowls, including the Belk Bowl in Charlotte, Will Webman, his group at the Charlotte Sports Foundation, they're basically scouting all the teams in both conferences as the season goes on. And anybody that's going to fall in, anybody that gets bowl eligible, you have to know about them. You have to get introduced to their fan base, get introduced to their administrators, and get a feel for if they're going to be excited to come to Charlotte. And then when it comes to Selection Sunday, a lot of that stuff, we may not know until 15 minutes before it's announced what team we're actually going to get. There's a lot of cooperation between the bowls. We're in a tier, like for the ACC, the Belk Bowl's in a tier with the New Era Pinstripe Bowl, with the Music City Bowl, and some off years the Sun Bowl. So you're talking to the bowls too, and also trying to figure out if we think these are the teams that are down there, what works best for you. And it's not just on one side; it's a matchup on the field too. We were talking earlier, talking about last year's selection for the Belk Bowl, which was Virginia Tech and Arkansas, and the question was,
a very cold night, by the way.
Really cold.
What a great finish! What a great finish!
What a crazy game.
Two different halves of football.
Yeah.
You don't want to blow out in a game, and we had a blowout in each half, which was very interesting. It turned out to be a great, exciting game for the fans. But what it came down to, we were talking earlier about, were we considering South Carolina for the game last year? Well, yeah, we were considering them, but the things you take into account also were South Carolina played in Charlotte for the kickoff game 2 years ago. They're playing in Charlotte this year. And the other thing is, looking at what team was falling on the other side, Arkansas, we looked at Arkansas, Virginia Tech, and thought that would be a compelling matchup on the field that works well from a TV standpoint, a matchup. I'm not saying that South Carolina, Virginia Tech wouldn't, but Arkansas versus Virginia Tech here in Charlotte looked like it'd be a good matchup for television. It was also a good matchup for Belk, the title sponsor. It's important for them to get value of the title sponsorship and get exposure. And Arkansas, the market and the fan base for Arkansas, Belk wanted to take the chance to get exposed to them because they already had for the Belk kickoff for South Carolina. And then it turned out to be an unbelievable game on the field.
Everybody was happy with that except for William Wilson in the second half, by the way. But does a team, you mentioned South Carolina was at the preseason game against North Carolina a couple years ago. What if these teams in North Carolina State was here against Mississippi State a couple years ago?
In the Belk Bowl, yes.
In the Belk Bowl. Could a team like either NC State or South Carolina conceivably, as the dominoes fall, as the season progresses, find their way back to the Belk Bowl at the end of the year?
Yes. What happens at the beginning of the year is very different than the end of the year, because the end of the year, everything is determined by what happened over the previous 3 months during the football season. With the Belk College kickoff game, in order to schedule these games, you have to schedule them well in advance, not paying attention to what could happen if they're going to be eligible for the bowl later on. We would absolutely consider a team that played in the kickoff game for the bowl game. But there's also enough teams in the mix that sometimes that might not happen. If it's a compelling matchup and it makes sense, we would totally do it.
You have high rollers like Jeff Taylor that go to every Gamecock game. They're going to drop a lot of dough and spread the wealth around, right, Jay?
And the interesting part about both those teams, you talk about maybe coming back to the Belk Bowl, if you look at some of the experts and just what some people are thinking, both those teams, I've seen people pick them as high as winning their divisions or finishing 4th or 5th. Now, winning them may be a stretch, but
very long stretch,
but you never know. They get on a roll, but these are two teams that there's so much that can happen, but I could see them being very successul with those young group of kids and the coaches they have, where they could finish in the upper part and be that attractive ticket to the Belk Bowl.
Reg, I think Philip Rivers or Roman Gabriel have to come back in order for NC State to win their division or to win the conference. That's there's going to have to be a lot of things fall into place.
Or the big guy on the defensive front, Chubb, is a Heisman Trophy candidate. At which point that means they are, which it could very well be. At which point, if he's playing that well, which I think he's got the talent to do, if he's playing that well, they should be really, really good, which could put them there. But again, I think you're asking for a lot of dominoes to fall to see them to a point to where defensive lineman is being considered for a Heisman Trophy.
All right, Frank, real quick, before we break, when people are watching this show, how can people still get tickets and get involved with the Belk preseason kickoff?
Well, with the Belk College kickoff game, you can get sorry, I have a cough.
Is that a Cleveland Brown cough?
Yeah, I deserve that, but that's okay. I'm a glutton for punishment.
I know. You're loyal, but
we'll talk about the Cavs trade later too, right?
Yeah, I know.
Tickets are available for the Belk College kickoff still. You can get them on Ticketmaster.com or you can go to BelkTickets.com, and they're both available there. What the Charlotte Sports Foundation has tried to do is trying to make this an annual thing in Charlotte, where Charlotte is one of the homes for the kickoff for college football season. I talked about planning games ahead. This year was NC State, South Carolina. Next year we have West Virginia playing Tennessee here in Charlotte.
That's going to be a good one.
That would be.
That's going to be a good one.
Tennessee here in Charlotte.
It's going to be an interesting game.
2019 is North Carolina versus South Carolina.
Oh.
2020, we have Wake Forest, Notre Dame.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that won't be a the kickoff game. That'll probably be a regular season, but they're going to play it down here in Charlotte, which is great for the city, great for the fan bases. In 2021, we have East Carolina playing App State, and in 2023, we have North Carolina, South Carolina again here. So, it's good for Charlotte. It's good for the community. It has a positive economic impact on the city. Not just looking for the Belk Bowl at the end of the college season, but being able to package and go, we're starting the college football season here in Charlotte. We're ending it in Charlotte with 2 good games, and in between, people can enjoy the season. That's what it's all about. We want the fans to have fun and enjoy it.
Well, Frank, thanks to you and Will Webb at Raycom Sports for putting and keeping Charlotte on the football college sports map, as well as the Belk Bowl. And everybody knows this area for college basketball. Now it's a college football town with the Belk Bowl and the Belk preseason kickoff. Frank K from Raycom Media, thank you for coming in. We'll be back with more talking about sports right after this. Thank you. Welcome back to talking about sports and college football on the docket. Big weekend of college football.
In earnest.
Love it.
This has got to be your time of year, Reggie. You got Michigan and Florida at Jerry's World, AT&T Stadium. Alabama, number 1 team Alabama against number 3 Florida State. Your Penn State Nittany Lions, is it Kutztown State?
We open with Akron. We open with the fighting Terry Bowdens of Akron.
Oh, well, Terry, he's a good coach.
He's a good coach.
But you couldn't find anybody better? You couldn't play?
And we got Pitt next week, and then
they're good.
And then we got another, we got Georgia State. Then
more cream puffs.
Then we get into the meat of the Big Ten schedule. Hey, we play 9 conference games, so you add Pitt to the mix. Hey, we're playing a good schedule.
Pitt's solid.
Pitt's going to be solid. Narduzzi's a great coach. Anyway, enough about my Nittany Lions right now.
What about? I'm really looking forward to, like everybody else is, Alabama and Florida State. I think this could be the national championship game. I mean, I think both teams are, you'd have to say, are the preseason favorites to win their respective conferences.
Well, let me say this first, because I know. Listen, Nick Saban's number 1 again.
Highest paid coach
for obvious reasons. We know what he's done historically. Everyone trusts Nick. I trust Nick. Nick makes good decisions, but I have an issue with what he said recently. Nick Saban said, regardless of, we know what Jalen Hurts did last year, he said he's going to play Tua Tagovailoa, the freshman quarterback, this season. I don't care what anybody says. I don't remember a situation where that worked consistently. I don't think that's a smart move from Nick Saban to try to play both of those kids. You got a true freshman last year in Hurst that led you to the national championship game. He didn't lose that game. Your defense was on the field when the game was lost. Why would you take snaps away from him for a kid that's unproven? I realize the kid is talented, but to me, I think this might be the first time
he came in the spring and looked good. He came in the spring and looked good.
And that's fine, but I'm going to second guess Nick for one time.
Are you going to say that 2 quarterbacks means you have no quarterback?
That's not what I'm suggesting at all, but sometimes 2 quarterbacks can divide a locker room.
You dance with the girl who brought you.
I'm with you.
You dance with the girl who brought you. And I listen, you're right. As a freshman to do what he did last year, he has earned that spot. He has earned that spot, and I don't. Everybody has their little own. What's the word I'm looking for?
Quirks.
Yeah. Quarterbacks, and the team gets used to it.
Yes.
An offense gets used to it.
Jalen Hurts could go pro at the end of next year. So maybe this guy now only was the number 1 high school quarterback in America. He was the number 1 football player in all of high school football. The guy from Hawaii. Oh. I think you got to get this guy on the field to see what he has. I mean, I think it'll play itself out. And fourth quarter is who's playing in the fourth quarter is your number 1 guy.
I understand what you mean by that, Kevin, but I this is my point here. When you're playing 2 guys, no, not even that, even more so, what year do you stop going with potential and go with the guy that's better? See, last year for Alabama, it was about Hurts had more potential to grow and be better than the guys they had, Blake Barnett, yada, yada, yada.
Right.
So now you're telling me this guy, like, at what point do you say, I'm going with the guy that's best right now, not who's going to be best 2 years from now, and try to win a national championship?
Are you going to say maybe bring in the kid from Hawaii for, like, maybe some special goal line situations, fourth and some I like to give him JT, you remember LSU back in the day. they used to play two guys. Not you had your clear starter, then you had the guy that would come in for like one or two series in the second quarter and the third quarter, but your starter was your starter in the fourth quarter, and that's how it was.
But we live. Yeah, you're right. But we live in a different world too, where you have the mobile running quarterback. Where if you get within the 10-yard line, do you switch him out? Do you not switch him out? I like consistency. I like if the kid has earned it, which he has. I know this kid has potential, but you're right. Where's the fine line between potential and production? Because what if you bring this kid in? Let's just get crazy. He comes in and plays against Florida State. The kid from Hawaii, right?
What if he throws a pick?
And he throws 2 interceptions for pick 6, and they lose a game.
He's not playing after that.
And what does that do to his mentality?
Now you burnt the red shirt for no reason.
Yeah. What does it do to his mentality of it's what they do with all the. I don't know. In the pros.
You didn't like it when Warren Moon gave up some snaps to Gifford Nielsen back in the day?
Or Cody Carlson.
The commander,
Cody Carlson. I hated it.
I
don't understand the mentality because there's just he's earned it, and you dance with the goal who brought you, and that kid can learn. He's got the staff around him and the facilities and all that to be great. You dance with the girl who brought you and let that person run the ship.
And I'm not saying this is going to be the downfall of Nick Saban or the downfall of an Alabama season, but it's amazing to me the amount of trust that everyone seems to have in Nick. And I'm not saying we shouldn't, but again, there's this level of trust in Nick that's like, yeah, he said he's going to play 2, whatever. If McElwain would have said that in the situation they got in Florida right now, people would have said, well, that means he can't find one. They can't figure it out, yada, yada, yada.
McElwain doesn't have the track record that Nick Saban has.
Help me out here, though. Didn't he have 2 quarterbacks transfer?
Yes.
And you remember what they said?
Blake Barnett, Cooper Bateman. They said they didn't handle it right.
Hey, Saban didn't handle it right. He told them one thing, and they did something else.
I like who he's got now, though.
And everybody else piled on the kids for questioning Nick.
Right.
And again, I'm not saying we shouldn't trust what Nick has done.
Absolutely.
But there are times where you should be able to say, because I'll say it like this. Most people would criticize any coach in the country for saying they're going to play 2 quarterbacks. And then with Nick, we just sort of walk out of the way and say, well, we're not going to question Nick. I just think that's a little bit hypocritical for some people to do that.
I don't think there's many Nick Sabans out there, but I think Jimbo Fisher has a very good ball club, and Francois, his quarterback at Florida State. I think if Alabama's going to lose this game, I think Florida State is going to beat them, not Alabama beating themselves. But it remains to be seen. I mean, what about Michigan has a lot of guys down in their game against Florida at AT&T Stadium. That's going to be a good one.
Well, first, who's going to play? We don't know who's going to play.
Who's playing for Florida?
Jim Harbaugh won't release a roster, so we don't know who's going to play. I mean, he has since, but Harbaugh was reluctant to release an actual roster. Hey, Jim, that's just a list of guys' names with height, weight, and hometown. We're not asking what the depth chart is.
The 2 deep.
It's okay. We're not asking for the 2 deep. We just wanted a roster. Now we have that. Thank you. So we don't know who he's going to play because we don't know who's on his team. And then you turn around and
the debacle that is
McElwain's got I don't know. I'm not going to hyperbolize, but he's got double figures guys that are suspended for the first game of the season. That tells me
what for? What they do?
No, there's a myriad of things. Conduct detrimental to being probably late for curfew. I don't know.
They don't have that at Penn State.
It was actually.
Well, we try to stay within the lines at Penn State and Happy Valley.
There was some debit card scam or something.
A lot of things going on there.
Around what it might
different reasons for different
scammers,
guys.
what?
Guys just had different reasons. And to me, anytime you're dealing with a situation where you're missing 10 guys, some of those guys are starters or projected starters. You just don't know what that team's going to look like, and then we don't know what Jim Harbaugh is going to do. So I think it's an intriguing game, less about the standpoint of what we already know, but more from a standpoint of what may we see because we don't know.
I don't know if this game's going to be visually pleasing with the Michigan Wolverines and all maize and the Florida Gators and the all blue. This is going to be like one of these. The college
might want to get those 3D glasses.
Color rush?
This is a college football color rush game.
Did you save your Eclipse glasses? You might need them for this one.
That was kind of a disappointment, by the way. So an intriguing quarterback matchup with North Carolina. They're hosting Cal, and then not saying they're looking ahead, but they got a big conference game next week against Louisville. So they have to figure out some things. North Carolina has 2 quarterbacks, Reggie, and I think a guy like Larry Fedora has to play both guys to figure out because he's trying to replace Mitch Trubisky. I think you have to. It's not just spring ball and in the preseason camp. You got to figure out who's going to do well in game action.
Well, and this is going to sound weird. I don't question that, but you've got a situation where you've got unproven guys. My point on the Alabama situation is you've got a proven guy that took you to a national championship game. The situation at North Carolina is completely different. You've got two guys that haven't really thrown a lot of college passes. Right. They don't have that level of experience to where you should be able to look at them and say, I know I can trust this guy to lead my football team. Nick Saban can do that with Jalen Hurts. We don't know what the case is with Tua. So you talk about the two guys at North Carolina. Larry Fedora's sitting there going, I got to figure out who can run my offense.
I like the transfer from LSU. I'm gonna
him and the forward pass didn't go well together a couple of years ago, so I don't know.
Maybe didn't get a chance to because they were so conservative in the play calling under Les Miles.
But along those lines, when you have the two quarterbacks who are unproven, and I don't know because never coached that way, but do you let one play the first game and one play the second game? I mean, do you let a kid get into a flow of a game? I don't know how you work that in terms of it's a weird deal.
I don't know the exact formula for that. I mean,
but you know what I'm getting at.
There's a lot of guys that make a lot more money than me that can make that decision.
Some kids get hotter as the game progresses.
Absolutely,
the running game opens up.
Well,
change.
You look at USC last year. I mean, they looked horrible against Alabama in the first couple of drives, and they realized real quick, you know what, we need to roll with Sam Darnold. And once they figured that out, they put it all together. And sometimes that happens. I'm not suggesting that's not the case, but my point is, if Jalen Hurts, when we're talking about an Alabama team right now, if Jalen Hurts goes out there and throws 3 picks in the first half, that doesn't mean you pull him and you bench him for the rest of the season.
Right.
That's a kid that just had a bad half.
Right.
And it's probably because he thinks his job's on the line.
Well, that's what I want. Right.
So I think you got to be careful with the psyche of some of these kids.
I believe Duke has Baylor this weekend. I don't think much discussion needs to take place with Dave Clawson and the Wake Forest Demon Deacons and Presbyterian College.
No.
But Clemson's in action. But coaches on the hot seat, we've said for weeks, could be Dave Doran at NC State. I don't think Dave Clawson at Wake Forest is.
No.
Dave Doran could be the guy at NC State.
How
what about other guys either locally, regionally, or nationally?
Well, back to Doran for just a second. How hot does that seat get if he loses to South Carolina?
Well, it gets the temperature rise.
Yeah, I think you turn the stove on. I think the stove maybe gets turned on. But my issue there is, and I've said this ad nauseum, what does the administration at NC State think their football program is?
Right.
Because as we've talked about, when you think about just in the conference, when you think about your Virginia Techs, your Miamis, your Florida States, your Louisvilles, okay, just right there. By the time you get to NC State, and I mean this respectfully, at best they're probably 5th in the pantheon of football tradition in the ACC. At best, 5th.
At best.
So again, I asked the administration, if you're 5th best, that sounds like you're asking for 8-4 on a given year.
Right.
You know, you get your 9-3s and your 10-2s here and there, and you may slip to 6-6 here and there. But it sounds like to me the expectations at a place like NC State and Raleigh might be a little higher than they need to be.
Right.
Are you of the Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, know your damn role?
Yes. To an extent.
They need to know their role as we're mid-card guys. We're mid-card jabrones, and we'll take a 10-win season every 5 or 6 years, 9 wins every 2 or 3 years, 6-6 every other year, and maybe a 4-6 every other year.
I think I think that the standard there should be we want to go to the postseason every year.
We want to go to a bowl game.
And once you get there, I mean, hey, anything else is a plus because you have to be aware of what it is you're dealing with in your own conference.
Right.
All right, we've already had a coach fired, Hugh Freeze at Ole Miss, for off-field issues. He apparently thought he was in Pahrump, Nevada, where it was legal.
Easy.
But he's out, so we have an interim coach. I don't know why someone hadn't picked up the phone and called Les Miles, by the way. Who are some guys that could find their way out early? Who are some national guys, maybe even regional guys? You mentioned Dave Doran could get the quick hook if somehow they start off 2-0-3 or something. But what about nationally? What are some guys that Jim Moore at UCLA? What are some Kevin Sumlin at Texas A&M? Who are some guys that could get the hook?
I think Sumlin's in a precarious position, not because of the amounts of wins and losses, but because of the way it continues to happen.
Right.
You're starting the year, you're 5-0, you're 6-0,
and then crash and burn,
and then you crash and burn. And oh, by the way, let's call it what it is: the mystique of Johnny Manziel, who he didn't recruit, but what Johnny was able to do against Nick Saban. Because again, people get fired because they can't beat Nick. Well, since Johnny left, he can't beat Nick. And when you can't beat Nick, you're probably going to get fired.
There's a lot of guys that can't beat Nick.
And that's why a lot of guys have gotten fired.
Well,
You look at the situation at Georgia. You look at the situation. Well, South Carolina was
Kirby
a little
Smart
bit
is
different.
his former coordinator, so I don't think Kirby's going anywhere. He's a year or two of probably a long, expensive contract.
But Mark Richt got fired because he couldn't beat Nick.
Right.
I mean,
Period.
Les Miles, he couldn't beat Nick.
Nick.
And my man in up in Fayetteville, Arkansas, Brett Bielema,
the widely regarded,
he
Brett
better
Bielema.
figure out how to beat Nick. Or he's going to be out of there.
He's going to be out the door too. Yep.
If you can't beat Nick, you're going to be out the door. I think the only one that's pretty safe because he seems to find a way to beat a lot of other people is our boy down in Stark Vegas, Dan Mullen.
Stark Vegas.
Starkville, Mississippi, for those that are not familiar.
Former outpost. You like those cowbells ringing during the game?
No.
You don't like that?
Nah.
I think you like them if it's your team and you hate them if it's not.
I look forward to that on Thanksgiving night, the Egg Bowl, Ole Miss and Mississippi State. I think Mississippi State's going to have a better year for what it's worth for the 2 or 3 Bulldog fans who care out there. All right, we got a lot more to go. Reggie Walker, Jeff Taylor, Kevin Casey from the Dilworth Neighborhood Grill. This is Talking About Sports. Welcome back to Talking About Sports from the Dilworth Neighborhood Grill. Jeff Taylor, Reggie Walker, Kevin Casey here, and we had a big fight, a super fight over the weekend, a spectacle, if you will. Wasn't Gorilla Monsoon and Chuck Webner, Muhammad Ali, or Antonio Inoki. This was Conor McGregor and Floyd Money Mayweather. Jeff Taylor, your thoughts from the bout?
Didn't watch it. Didn't care about it. I thought that everything leading up to it was a complete disgrace.
Tell us how you really feel, JT.
I don't, and I mean, I'm just being honest. And I don't like Mayweather. I don't like McGregor. I think that I know it was a show, but some of the way, listen, people are watching, and you don't. Our country's bad enough sometimes as it is. You don't need to be talking the way you were talking. And I know it's a show, and I know it's just that, but I just couldn't support it. I think, people said it was great for boxing, it was great for the MMA, and it went 10 rounds. So God bless Conor McGregor for hanging in there, and Mayweather for, and for the fight itself. I just didn't watch it, and I thought it was, to me, a disgrace for the way it was all leading up to it, and things could have been done and said differently. That's just me.
Reggie, are you like people like my son who dropped, not only did he not have the money, but he spent it anyway, dropped 100 bills to watch this spectacle? Did you feel like people got their money's worth, or were they fleeced like Jeff Taylor could?
Here's what I think about it. First of all, in some ways I agree with Jeff. I thought the way they were acting leading up to the fight, I thought they did so much to try to sell the fight that they may have oversold it to the point to where people may not have wanted to see it. Now, that being said, I wasn't overly excited to watch it, and then all of a sudden the day of, I'm like, I can't really miss this because it's sort of an event that I need to see. Just so happened my cousin, shout out to James, ordered the fight, so we all went over there and watched
help
it.
him out? Did you chip in?
And we all chipped in.
Can you get a receipt
so
for
we're able
KT
to watch it
for our corporate expense account? Because I'm going to try to submit that too.
Now I do think that people are saying the fight was quote unquote great because of Mayweather fight ended in a knockout. I still didn't think the fight was much different than any Mayweather fight, but I'm a boxing purist. I'll watch boxing all day long. So I didn't think it looked that much different. I thought the weight difference, once McGregor hydrated up from the weigh-in, when he got in the ring, I think Floyd, he definitely lays back to see what a guy's constitution is in the first part of the fight. I thought what he did, he was doing that, but at the same time, Conor was big, and he couldn't figure out really how to get inside. Once he figured that out, he was able to land some punches, made some rib shot deposits, if you will, and he was able to close the fight late. Floyd is a very smart fighter. He knew that the power of Conor wasn't going to hurt him, so he was able to go ahead and stick his head in there, and he knew later in the fight Conor would wear down, so he was able to close him out.
I knew there was going to be some. You guys don't know. I'm from wrestling, man. It's called selling the bout. It's called everybody's getting paid. We're in this to make money. They did a great job selling this spectacle. Could they come back and do it again? Yes. Could Conor McGregor fight Nate Diaz number 3? Yes. Floyd Mayweather could fight somebody if he wants to, but I don't think he will. I think it was a great fight.
Floyd should never come back to boxing.
All right, a quick shout out. Thanks to William Wilson last week for being here and being our friend. And Kevin Tolbert on IR, but still here and competing. He's got his cast on. Looks like Gene Anderson of the Minnesota Wrecking Crew with his cast on. Got Pearl Harbor at the PGA tournament. Got clipped from behind. His arm's in a cast right now. You can't see it. He's behind the camera. So thanks to KT for all your hard work all preseason long and everything you've done, extending yourself for our podcast here. So for Jeff Taylor, Reggie Walker from the Dilworth Neighborhood Grill, I'm Kevin Casey. This is Talking About Sports. So long for now.